In 2023, there were two collections that expanded a great deal, and I really gained a whole new level of love for. One was just kind of my collective wrestling collection, but collection number two was DC. After taking a few years away from collecting DC, last year and especially 2023 was a major upsurge in the DC figures I was actively looking for. And I have to say, they really blew me away this year. These five in front of you are people who did not make it onto my top 10 list for 2023, but they are all spectacular, and I'm sure you can tell this list is going to be mostly DC Multiverse. I think McFarlane has been knocking it out of the park overall, even though there have been some duds here and there, but there are some other DC lines I've been trying to mix in with Multiverse, usually things like DC Collectibles / DC Direct, but we'll see if any of them ever actually made it to the top 10. A big thing I need to say, though, is the fact that for a figure to get on this list, they did not have to come out in 2023, they had to be purchased by me in 2023. So there are some figures here that might be a bit older, and alongside that, if there's a figure that came out that I just don't own, they are not going to be on the list, because that doesn't seem, fair. I don't have direct experience with it. But with all that said, let's get to the top 10. At number 10 is a figure I think a lot of people slept on. This is the Rebirth Superman from the 2-pack with Ultraman. And I really adore this figure. They took my favorite Superman figure and gave him a more happy head sculpt. Even though I prefer the older one just a touch more, this Superman really is something special. For no other reason than it's weirdly hard to get Supermen that are actually just happy looking. Most of them are stoic or, even worse in my opinion, just outright pissed. But I love this big cheeky doofy grin. Now, my favorite superhero of all time changes depending on the time of day. It's either Superman or Nightwing, so we're going to have to see if there's any other Supermen or perhaps a few Nightwings on the list later. I think for most people, the Batman of the year from Multiverse would be the Nightfall Batman. And even though I like that Batman a lot, this Hush Batman is just something else. I love the blue Hush Batman. I love his little kryptonite ring. I love the accessories he came with. I loved how they did the articulation and the general style. For my money, this is now my display Batman. It is, for me, the best 7-inch scale comic book Batman. Though Nightfall is also very good, do not get me wrong, I just like this Hush one ever so slightly more. Going from Batman to one of my favorite villains of his, this Mr. Freeze. I have been needing a good display Mr. Freeze, and I really like the Mr. Freeze they went with. This very kind of bulky, almost 50s sci-fi design, his amazing head sculpt underneath the dome. There are a couple of complaints I have, though. One, it's hard to balance the guy, and two, I hate the ice effect coming out of his gun. I wish that could come out, or even if it was just not there, but those two nitpicks aside, this figure is just great, a wonderful depiction of Victor Freeze, and one that is very proudly on the front row of my DC villain shelf. Hey, you remember the Flash movie coming out this year? I don't, but I'll tell you what I do remember. The really good Batgirl figure, and then this Batman. This Batman is a Batman I have wanted for years. A good Michael Keaton Batman that is in scale with my other figures and isn't insanely expensive. Now, they did do a more accurate to the 89 Batman figure with the Batmobile. I don't know if I want it or not. I want the figure, don't know if I want the Batmobile. This figure is basically the same, though. Only difference is he has some green on his boots and some, no yellow on the belt. It's the best thing to come out of the Flash movie, this Batman figure. Yes, I did say that. Yes, I will die on that hill. The movie came out and the only thing that was worth reviewing or worth enjoying about it was this amazing Batman figure. And also the very good Supergirl figure. So the Titans are back in the comics, and that meant that there was a Titans wave this year, and it is the best wave McFarlane has ever put out. There were 4 figures in it, 3 of them were on this list, and it also had a very good Build-A-Figure. I wasn't big on the fact that it was Beast Boy, but it was a good figure, nonetheless. But we have to give the nod to Raven. This is a wonderful depiction of Raven's newer design, as you would see them in the new Titans book, which, I'll be honest, I'm still really enjoying. I like seeing Dick Grayson and friends, for the lack of a better term. I kind of wish we could get a more traditional multiverse cyborg. That would really complete the team great. But in the meantime, this Raven is really giving us a glimpse into what it could look like to get a full, proper Teen Titans display going. I think if you get a Cyborg and a Starfire, this Raven just becomes even better down the road. But for right now, they are still one of the standout figures of the year for me. Someone who just barely missed out on the top 5. Depending on the time of day, my favorite Flash is either Wally West or Jay Garrick. And guess what? We got a good Wally West this year, and we got a spectacular Jay. This is my favorite figure Jay Garrick has ever had, though, to be fair, there aren't many Jay Garrick figures to begin with. It is a perfect encapsulation of his Golden Age design. I like the fact that it is a bit of a younger Jay. He's not as wrinkly as you would expect from the Jay Garrick we've seen in the modern DC multiverse. But this figure is just so bright. It pops off the shelf. The helmet is sparkly. The figure looks great. And I'll never forget the fact that when I had Cameron, Ruby, and Maddie going around the toy collection with me, they were really taken aback by this Flash. It was one of their favorite superhero designs, and I have to agree with them. Jay knew how to run around with a bit of class. Here's a figure who shocked me. I was never big on the DC Icons figures, but they had a very, very good Supergirl. Honestly, probably my favorite Supergirl ever. I mean, I love how the cape drapes over the shoulders. I love the head sculpt. I love everything about this Supergirl. It helps that I really enjoyed the run of comics that this Supergirl look is based off of. Now, McFarlane has just done a Supergirl that is the same design, but I like this one more still, mostly because the plastic cape gives you the ability to have the cape over the shoulders. Cloth capes are cool and everything, but I don't know, dude, this just looks sick. It looks really, really good. And to be fair, I've been waiting a very long time for a Supergirl figure that I could really gush over, and this is that figure. At number 3, I had to give some love to my favorite Batman villain. McFarlane's take on the classic Riddler was perfect. This is now my favorite Riddler action figure. I adore everything about him. He has just captured the energy I want from the character so well, in a way I never thought I could get out of a non-suited Riddler. This Riddler is so good, it has convinced me that Tights Riddler might be even better than my preferred Riddler look from all these years. What can I say, man? That's the power of a good Edward Nygma. They get into the top 3 of the year, and quite frankly, the only reason they're not at the top 2 is because, well, favoritism. You want to know something I never knew about myself? The fact that I wanted a really good Donna Troy figure, but now I have it. From that Titans wave, this Donna Troy is one of the best figures I've ever seen for DC. It's a figure that really shows just how much of a crime it is that we are just now getting a classic Wonder Woman next year, or rather, this year, 2024. I'm just absolutely taken with Donna Troy. It helps that, like I said, I'm really enjoying the Titans books. It helps that I love the Teen Titans as a team. It helps that this is, at the end of the day, probably the best figure Donna Troy ever has gotten, and possibly ever will get. The only reason they're not at number 1, kind of like the Riddler, is more or less out of favoritism. But I would make the argument this is probably the best figure out of the entire toy line this year, and it really helps cement the fact that, like I said, that Titans wave is the best wave McFarlane has ever put out. Even Harper, who I'm not a big fan of Red Arrow / Arsenal, I would still have considered him for this list. That's how good the wave was. And number 1 is Nightwing. I'm sorry, of course it's Nightwing. It's Nightwing as he appears in the newest Nightwing run, as well as Titans. As I've said before, the newest run of Nightwing is my absolute favorite run Nightwing has ever had as a character. Nightwing has always been one of, if not my absolute favorite superheroes. It's always been a competition, really, between him and Superman. So, getting a figure this good, in the Titans wave, in which he was surrounded by other excellent figures, just made this the standout DC figure of the year for me. No question about it. Between action figures and comics and the animated movies and shows, DC has been on a tear this year for me. and it's looking to keep that momentum going into 2024. These 3 figures are amazing, makes me so excited to see what McFarlane gives us next, and I'm just really happy to see some of the characters I've always really loved getting some of that long-deserved attention.